Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the Chris Voss Show.com, the Chris Voss Show.com. Here in Montpost, we want to share, of course, with you the latest in social media and technology. Be sure to give us a like, subscribe to us, hit that subscribe button, subscribe to us on YouTube. That way you can get all the latest and greatest updates, review all the major phones from all the major phone companies. So we're going to be reviewing today a versus comparison between the Motorola Moto X versus the Samsung Galaxy S4. Now, what we'll be doing is reviewing the phones themselves, their operating systems, and the benchmarks and their cameras. So be sure to watch all the way to the end to see all the cool stuff we do and see what we think. Now, these phones are brought to us today from amzn.to. That's amzn.to with the fastest download upload speeds. Thanks to AT&T for sharing the phones with us. We certainly appreciate their support. And you can go to their website to check out all these and all the wonderful phones we reviewed from AT&T and all the major carriers on the chrisvossshow.com. So let's get into this. We're going to compare them side by side, first spec-wise, to see what the specs are versus each other. So on the Motorola Moto X, we have an Android 4.2.2. On the Samsung Galaxy S4, we also have the same operating system of 4.2.2. The dimensions on the Moto X are 5.09 inches, 2.57 in width, 0.41 inches in thickness with a 4.59 ounce weight. On the S4, you're looking at a 5.38 in height, 2.75 in width, and 0.31 in thickness with a 4.59 ounce weight. They're virtually the same weight. Display size, 4.7, 720 by 1280 pixels, and a pixel density of 316 ppi, an AMOLED screen, multi-touch, etc., etc. On the S4, we're looking at a 5-inch screen for display, 1080 by 1920 pixels at 440 ppi. Super AMOLED screen, 16.7 million colors, multi-touch, etc., etc. Now, on the battery for both these devices, you're looking at 2200 milliamp hours on the Moto X. On the S4, you're looking at 2600 milliamp hours that you can take and do. Now, inside the guts of this, the Moto X has a modified Motorola X8, which essentially is a Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro MSM 8960. And they've added a lot of different things to this processor chip. They've modified it to do some very special things where it listens all the time, yet it burns low battery. There's several different modifications you can look up on Google that are pretty amazing what they've done with it. It is just a dual core, 1.7 gigahertz Kraut, and it comes with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 16 gigabytes of storage. You can also buy a more expensive model that's 32 gigabytes of storage. On the S4, we're looking at Qualcomm Snapdragon 600. It's a quad core, so it has 2 more cores than the Moto X, 1.9 gigahertz. 2 gigabytes of RAM, 16 gigabytes of built-in storage, and I believe you can get this in a 32 gigabyte version if you pay a little bit more, just like the Moto X. Now, camera-wise, on the Moto X, you're looking at 10 megapixels, and you've got 1080p video recording. Now, one thing that's really cool about the Moto X, it does have 60 frames per second, so you get really rich and very beautiful video. The front-facing camera on it is 2 megapixels. Now, on the S4, you're looking at a 13 megapixel camera, 1080p, only 30 frames per second on the video with a front-facing camera of 2 megapixels. Now, of course, they both have NFC chips to them. One difference, though, is the S4 has a removable back where you can expand the memory with a micro SD card up to 64 gigabytes, whereas the Moto X is limited to what's in the case. There's no way to expand the memory with a micro SD card. So, for some people they like that, some people they don't. It's really up to you and what you feel about both phones. Now, overall, I love both phones. I'm a big S4 fanatic. I have an S4 Active that I use on a regular basis from AT&T, and I love the S4s. I like the Moto X. The Moto X has some really nice features. It's definitely smaller and fits in your hand a little bit easier, but it really is up to you. Okay, so some of the features and aspects of both these phones are very different in what they have on them. The Moto X has a modified processor that basically is listening at all times and makes it so that you can easily get into Google Now to take and do stuff. In fact, it probably will activate here in a second. It's tuned to your voice, and so as soon as you say the words, "Okay, Google Now," it will take and activate Google Now and listen for what you want, and of course take it into Google search and everything else. You can make text messages where you say, text my friend, subject this, and then of course you fill in the text and send it, etc., etc. So there's several different things that this thing will take and do for you, and it's always listening, so you don't have to do anything to touch it and activate it. The Samsung does have something very similar with its own Samsung S Voice, but you do have to press a button first to activate the S Voice, and then it takes you into a thing where it can open apps, etc., just like the Moto X can. Now, in looking at both these phones, it really just depends on what you want to take and do. The most obvious and principal benefit of the Moto X is the Google Now, being able just to speak to it and have it do different things. It will also read text messages and emails to you while you're driving, as will the Samsung S4. There's some other different things that they both have where you can turn off notifications at different times. Some people like those features. When it comes to some of the other toys, bells, and whistles, though, the Moto X is lacking compared to the S4. The S4 definitely has more toys, bells, and whistles, and different add-ons that they've done. With the S4, you have stuff like screen mirroring, multi-window, which is kind of a Windows sort of function where you can have two windows open at once. They have an air gesture where you can wave your hand over the phone to turn things on and off. They have an air view. They also have what's called a you can wave your hand over the phone and do stuff. You have S-Beam where you can take and transfer files between your NFC. There's Smart Scroll, Smart Stay, where you can take and scroll up and down with your eyes and all that good stuff. Lots of different features that come with the S4 that make the S4 a favorite for myself. And it really just depends on what you want in a phone, what's convenient to you. Some people don't like having all these things on the phone. Of course, you don't have to have them active at all times. And they are kind of limited to the UI that are on the phone. But I like the Samsung S4 UI based on its customization ability. Mainly, there's a whole lot of different things you can do customizable to all different features, including adjusting the cores and speed and how much everything's using with the processor on your S4, where you can't really do that with the Moto X. So I think the S4 definitely wins when it comes to different features that are added on and different customizations you can do with the UI. I think the UI is much richer, and that's my opinion. So, going from the front of both these devices, we have some sensors. We have the front-facing speaker, which for calls, and you have the front-facing camera. Along the bottom, we have a capacitive touchscreen with the back button, home button, and a recent apps or open apps button, if you will. The menu button is normally found somewhere within each of the applicable apps that you have. You just look for a little area that is the menu area. On the bottom, we have a microphone. And then on the Samsung S4, we have, of course, some front-facing camera over here and capacitive touchscreens, or not really capacitive touchscreens, but sensors, if you will. We have a speaker for making calls. Down below, we have a capacitive touchscreen area for back and menu, and then a hard home button, if you will. So flipping these babies around so you can see them, we have on the back of the Moto X. Now, one thing that is kind of unique to the aspect of the Moto X is you can go online with a voucher once you buy it from AT&T or whatever the vendor is, and you can customize the color and also have a logo or insignia, not logo or insignia, like a name embossed, like the Chris Voss Show or Chris Voss. You can have that embossed on the back and put in letters for you. So it comes with a very nice back that's beveled edges. I like the way the S4 holds in the hand also, but you can basically pick the colors that you want on the S4 for both the front and back, so they have a multitude of different combinations. You can see here we've got our camera eye, we've got our lamp flash, we've got our speaker. Not really excited about the speaker that's on the Moto X. I have problems with it, with people hearing me on speakerphone, which I routinely use on the S4, and it's hard to hear, especially when it's facing down. It's not very big, it seems. That's how I feel about it. On the S4, you have your camera eye, you have your lamp flash, you have your speaker that's down here, and all that good stuff. It's a fairly good sized speaker that you'll see once we pull this back off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the tops of both these devices. Now on the top across, we have a small microphone hole for the Moto X and the center earphone jack hole, so that sometimes is nice. Across the top of the S4, we have that little left hole that you see there. Isn't really a hole, it's an IR blaster where you can take and control TVs, things of that nature, etc., etc. On the far right, we of course have the earphone jack, and right beside it the microphone hole, that small little thing that you see there. Across the sides, on the left side, we have the volume rocker button for the S4, and on the Moto X, just this nano SIM card tray. Across the bottom, we have your Moto X, the charging sync ports, as we do also the sync port for the S4, and there's a small microphone hole that's there. And then across the right hand side on the Moto X, we have the volume rocker button, the power button, and then we have the power button on the S4. So that kind of gives you the roundabout between both these devices. They both feel comfortable in the hand, very ergonomically comfortable. And the one thing about the S4 is it does have a pop-off back, so the back will take and remove and everything else. Along here you can see we have a area for the micro SD card to be plugged in, and we have removable battery. I got to tell you, I love the removable battery function of the S4. I bought some extra batteries from Amazon with the charger, and man, it's nice just not always having to charge up your phone. I just flip the batteries out and let the charger sit at home and keep the batteries juiced up for me. Really nice, and I think you can buy them really cheap on Amazon. So there it gives you a walk around of both these phones. Okay, so here we're looking at the Geekbench 2 scores that both these got. Now there's a Geekbench 3 out, we'll also take a review. The score on the HTC One came in at 2080, which is pretty normal for the many times we tested it. And the Geekbench 2 score came in at 3215. You can see the integer scores, floating point scores, memory scores, stream scores, floating point scores, etc. We're not going to page down through this because we're actually going to do the Geekbench 3 test. Okay, so here we have the Geekbench 3 test. This is a newer app that's out from Geekbench. You can see here that the score came out very different than what we had with Geekbench 2, so that's why we're presenting both of them. The single core score was 672 on the Moto X, 1252 on the Moto X. For the multi-core score, 642 for the single score on the S4 against 1578 for the multi-score. So kind of interesting how these new Geekbench 3 app breaks these things down. Obviously it is a multi-core, so it definitely scored higher. You have 4 cores, of course, with the S4 comparatively to the Moto X. Naturally, it should be faster because it has a faster processor, but you never know. Sometimes these days, some phones have more memory, and that can make a difference. Page down through these. If you want to pause at any time, you're certainly welcome to. I don't really look at most of these scores. Mostly what I'm looking for is the totals, which kind of round up all this stuff and make looking individually something if you want to do, you certainly can. Okay, so here we're using the 3D Mark app. This is a benchmarking app that tests a lot of different things with the phones, and this is the ice storm results that we've got here. Now, the Moto X came in at 11,438 in the score, and the S4 came in at 11,063. We're going to page down through some of the details so that you can see the details and breakdown here as to how the numbers came up and how they were applied and all that good stuff. And you can see down here some of the results of some of the other phones. So the nice thing about this app is you can follow along at home with most of these apps we're going to use for benchmarking. You can download them and compare them with the phones you're currently using now and decide which phones you want to upgrade to. Here you can see the AnTuTu benchmark scores. This is AnTuTu benchmark version 3.4. And the scores that came out on the Moto X were 18,850 against the Samsung Galaxy S4, 24,406. You can also see the breakdowns of the RAM, CPU, integer here, and all that good stuff. And we'll go ahead and page down. You can pause the video anytime if you so choose. And you can see how they basically mapped out against each other. Okay, so now here you can see we're doing a display test, and what we're doing is testing how well the colors come out on the different devices. I can tell you that the green is much, much richer on the Moto X. It's got a really great presentation of its colors, and they seem much more defined. I'm not sure why, because I know the PPI is higher on the Samsung S4, but I got to tell you the green's much richer, the red, all the colors are much more richer on the Moto X. So whatever they've done with the screen, they've done a really good job, especially since they don't have as many pixels per inch as the Samsung, but I'm very surprised. It's a very beautiful screen, and I got to tell you, I'm not sure how much you can tell through the camera, but I can tell you, looking at this directly, the Moto X definitely wins this test. Okay, so here with the Moto X, we're using the CF Bench 1.3 version app. This gives us more benchmarking tests that we can take a look at. The main thing we're looking at is the full score here, but I'll slowly page down through the results that we got so that those of you following along at home who really like looking at these things, you guys can see the individual scores that you took and got. But like I said, the main thing we're looking for is the total that we're going to find here at the bottom, the total scores. And it looks like we're coming in with total scores on the device, overall score 14,593 for the Moto X against 26,500 or 673, I believe that is. So the Samsung S4 definitely scoring much better than the Moto X in this test. Here we've run the Benchmark and Tuning app that you can see. This is an app that you can download, of course, off the Android store. You can see the little icon at the top. It's called Benchmark and Tuning. Looks like the Moto X scored 16,291 was the score against Samsung S4, 30,964. The S4 clearly winning in this result. Here we're using the Billion Counter app, and the Billion Counter app basically tests the processor by seeing how fast the phone can count to a billion. In this case, the Moto X has done it in 11.214 seconds, and in the Samsung S4 case, it's done it in 11.318 seconds. Okay, so here you can see we've done the pass mark performance test, and they both have scored fairly well. The system score for the Moto X came in at 2809 against 3374 for the S4. We're going to page down. We'll take a look at the CPU test. Now the CPU, of course, we have a quad-core processor over here against the dual-core processor on the Moto X. So you got 6,884 versus 1,450 or 570, and what is it? We got 10,568 versus 7,812 on the disk test. Memory 3276 versus 2956 on the memory test, and 2D graphics tests we have 2827 versus 2496. And then on 3D graphics test, we have 811 versus 1080. Okay, so here we have the GPS test, and what this basically does is tell us how well each device can pick up as many satellites as it possibly can to know where it is on the planet. You can see here that the Moto X is picking up an accuracy anywhere from, well, I've seen it down to 10 feet. It's now up to 26 and 30 feet for some reason. And it's got 30 satellites in view. It's picking up down to 12. And it's using about 9 to 10. You can see the S4 is doing a much better job of picking up satellites, 23 in view and 22 in use. Here we have the Vlamo app scores, and the scores in the Moto X came in at 2444 versus 772 on the Metal scores. And on the S4 for HTML5, we came in at 2185 and 730. On the Metal scores for the S4. Okay, so here we've run the Quadrant Standard app. You can see the scores here. We scored 8260 on the Moto X, and on the Samsung S4 we scored 12127. You can see some of the other scores down here below in the CPU, memory, I/O, 2D, and 3D ranges. Here we have the GFX bench 2.7.2 test. Now, this is the old GL bench, if you're familiar with the GL benchmark app. This is the newly updated one. Looks like we did, with the new updates, 903 frames at 16 frames per second compared to 869 frames at 16 frames per second on the S4. And on the Moto X, 1484 frames, 26 frames per second, comparatively to 853 frames at 15 frames per second. Okay, so let's take a look at how both these cameras operate. Now, the Moto X has some kind of unique stuff where you can do different things to get to the menus and stuff. You can even do a hand swirl, what's called a corkscrew with your hand to activate the camera without having to press any buttons. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know. It takes some practice, but you can pull in from either side to be able to either get into your gallery, or you can pull in from the other side to be able to get into your menu. You can push up and down to zoom. So there's not a whole buttons and stuff that you need to deal with. You've got your video and your front-facing camera that you flip, and of course if you want to do different menu things, slow motion video, panorama, location, HDR, all that good stuff, you can do it just by pulling that over. Now, with the Samsung Galaxy S4, you have a whole lot of features you can take and do with this, and it's pretty cool. You can, let's see if we can do them all. You got your flash, you've got your different scene settings you can take and do, microphone on and off. You can switch between MMS mode and slow motion and fast motion, which is a lot of fun, I got to tell you. You can, of course, share stuff automatically. You have different scenes and scenarios that you can shoot in, eraser, HDR, animated photo. You can take and create drama photos. You can take and create. These are really cool. These are pretty unique to the S4 experience. If you really can master these things, you can have a lot of fun with the S4, and that's what makes it so great. Is it's got just so many toys that are on it. One other thing you can do is, of course, change scenery modes. I think through. Let's see if we can figure out where to do that. Edit quick settings. In settings, you can go in and change burst shot, face detection, metering, ISO, anti-shake, auto night detection, video size, video stabilization features. You can change your GPS tags, volume keys, reviews, exposure values, ISO, all that sort of good stuff. And pretty crazy, all the stuff that you can take and do here. So let's take a look at the photos that you get from both these. Now, the one big difference between these two is the Moto X is a 10 megapixel, where the S4 is 13, of course. And what we're going to be looking at is video here. Now, I love the video that's on the Moto X. It's 60 frames per second. Let's take a look at both of them, how they run. They both have really rich color, and the color comes out really well. The S4 does look a little bit more pumped up, kind of manufactured with a little too much green in it. If you look at it, it doesn't quite look as normal. The blues, greens, and reds are amped up a little bit in a kind of a post-production phase, if you will. But some people might like that. To me, it does kind of look better on the screen, but you look at the Moto X, and it's more real colors and more real in its shots. Now, we're not really judging anything in particular here. We're just kind of taking a look at some of the different colors that are out there and how this picked up the colors that were in the garden here that we took and shot. You can see here, on one hand, you might look at the S4 and think it's better, but I can tell you the yellow, blues, and greens are jacked up. This is more of a normal photo of what the real colors will look like, and it's very accurate too in taking good clear shot and me being able to see the paint on the hydrant with the Moto X. So I actually like this better because this is more the real color and natural color of the effects of what I was shooting here. You can see my dog with the S4, and you can see some blue sky with the thing. Now, the Moto X does take really good close-up macro pictures. We were very impressed with that. Not so much with the S4. The Moto X does take, this is a picture where I'm almost on top of it, taking the photo with some cacti. You can see here, we're going to compare again. Looks like we got some photos we didn't want when I was pressing the screen. You can see here once again, it's good rich color in both these photos, but you of course have the amped value of the S4, which, like I said, isn't really accurate with the reality of what it is. Now, both of them have exceptional flash lamps in, and both of them do extremely well, as you can see here. The Moto X may have it beat by a little bit. Let's watch the video and see if it does. This is in a darkened environment, and I like the video a little bit more. The lamp seems to be a little bit more brighter with the S4, from what I can tell. It's pretty much a toss-up either way. They both do a really good job. I've seen a lot worse on a lot of other phones, so I'd say they both are going to do really well for you here on video. And there's your camera comparison. So after testing both phones, playing with them, and doing a side-by-side versus comparison, I like both phones. It's really up to you to decide which phone works best for you in your application and which you're comfortable using. You can get both these phones from our good friends at amzn.to. That's AT&T.com with the fastest download and upload speeds. You can take and search on the Chris Voss Show for all the other wonderful phones we reviewed from AT&T. Be sure to check those out, and the versus comparisons and the individual videos we've done on each of these products, reviewing them in full so you can see what our results were there. And give us a like, subscribe to us on YouTube. Be sure to check into chrisvossshow.com often, and also be sure you tune in next time. Thanks for coming by the chrisvossshow.com. Be sure to tell them Chris Voss sent you. Thanks for coming by.